Tracy is living all alone in such a huge lodge. That's just pure greed. Ashley has two little kids, you know. The successful older sister should give her home to her struggling younger sister. That's how families help each other. That's what's natural. The moment my mother Gina said that, her words drifted into the kitchen. The perfectly decorated Christmas cake in my hands sagged ever so slightly, and the cream lost its shape. We were at my parents' house in a quiet residential neighborhood in Colorado. Just a week ago, I had wrapped up a massive urban development project in Dubai and returned to the country for the first time in 6 months. But I couldn't rest. For the past 2 days, I had sacrificed sleep and poured everything I had into preparing this Christmas party. I had reserved the finest turkey well in advance and spent a full 2 days marinating it in a special blend of spices. I filled the living room with bright, festive decorations, just so that my sister's children would be happy. It was my own way of atoning for the time I couldn't be with my family, because of constant overseas assignments. I believed that the moment we would sit around this warm table, the bonds that had begun to fray would surely be mended. I prepared everything by myself, believing in that. But what drifted in from the dining room were not words of gratitude. I've already arranged for the contractors. My father, Dan, continued in his low, authoritative voice. We'll tear down the walls of the space Tracy uses as her study on the second floor of that lodge and turn it into a large playroom. Then you and the kids can live comfortably, Ashley. I'll have the floors replaced with something well-cushioned too. We'll get everything done while she's away on another business trip. We don't need her permission beforehand. She can approve it after everything takes place. That girl has money. Thank you, Dad. My sister Ashley's voice bounced with excitement. That study was always so dark and creepy, filled with nothing but books. Kids don't need a place like that. Turning it into a bright playroom will make Tracy happy too. We're family, after all. I felt the cold creeping into my fingertips. I'd finally managed to obtain the mountain lodge after working myself to the bone. From the design to the choice of materials, it embodied my pride as an engineer. It was my one true place of peace. Especially the study room. It was my sanctuary. I had carefully calculated everything, from the climate control to the lighting, to protect the precious book collection I had inherited from my late grandfather. And now, while I was away, they were planning to destroy it and take it from me, without my consent. Worse still, they were justifying it with the beautiful sounding words, family love. I drew a deep, quiet breath. Lashing out in anger is what amateurs do. I am a professional project manager. Without even looking in the mirror, I put on the mask of the perfect daughter. Sorry to keep you waiting. The main dish, the roast turkey, is ready. With my best smile in place, I lifted the heavy silver tray and stepped into the dining room. In that instant, the secretive tension that had filled the room vanished. My father hurriedly slid what looked like blueprints under his leg. My mother raised her voice unnaturally high. Oh my, what a wonderful smell. Ashley and her husband Steve simply sat there. Their faces still carried a vulgar excitement, the lingering heat of a plunderer's scheme. Tracy, you really are incredible. You've just finished such a huge project in Dubai, and yet you still prepared something this extravagant. I truly admire you. As Steve offered his hollow praise, he reached out to take the tray from my hands. I never let my smile fade as I handed it to him. It's for the family. I've been gone for 6 months, so I'd love to hear how everyone's been, slowly and properly. I took my seat and began serving the dishes I had spent 2 days preparing onto everyone's plates. They accepted it as if it were their unquestionable right, chewing and swallowing my effort. To them, my time, my labour, and even the property I owned were nothing more than shared assets, freely usable under the name of family. Throughout the meal, they skillfully tried to steer the conversation toward probing my next schedule. So, Tracy, you're heading back to New York again in January, right? You said before that you wouldn't be back for 2 months because of an audit project. You're always so busy. I worry about your health. My mother fixed me with a searching gaze. What she wanted to confirm wasn't my condition, but how long they would have a free window to trample over my home. Yes, that's the plan, but this time I'm thinking of using remote work more, so I thought I might spend more time relaxing at the mountain lodge. The moment I said that, a brief silence fell over the table. Ashley dropped her fork and it clattered loudly against her plate. My father cleared his throat and hurriedly took a sip of wine. No, Tracy, You shouldn't go back there right now. I've heard that because of the recent cold snap, the mountain road leading to the lodge is blocked by fallen trees and snow. Winters are harsh up there, and if something were to happen, it would be terrible. A busy woman like you doesn't need to go alone to such a dangerous, inconvenient place. It's best to leave it alone until spring. Focus on your work and stay in your city apartment. He piled lie after lie on top of his words, disguising them as parental concern, all to keep me away from the lodge. But I understood, hidden behind those words was the tight schedule of the renovation contractors he had arranged without my knowledge. The reason he was so desperate to keep me away was simple: to finish transforming it into Ashley's home while I was gone, and to turn it into a fait accompli before I ever found out. I tilted my wineglass and began counting silently in my head. Maybe you're right, Dad, I replied shortly. By the time the fondant au chocolat I had prepared for dessert was served, the mood in the dining room had reached its peak. My father was in high spirits, reminiscing about the past, while my mother leaned close to Ashley's children and whispered, "Soon you'll be able to play in a much bigger place." I watched the scene with an oddly detached calm. "Tracy, it's really delicious. Thank you for such a wonderful Christmas." Ashley smiled innocently at me, chocolate still smeared around her mouth. No one would believe that behind that smile lay a greedy intent to throw my belongings out of my house and fill it with their own. "I'm glad you enjoyed it, Ashley. I truly hope your life from here on out becomes a better one," I replied with a smile. The party ended and everyone retreated to their rooms. The house finally fell silent sometime after 1 a.m. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. From the back of my closet, I pulled out my work laptop and connected to a dedicated encrypted line. The first thing I did was review the surveillance footage from my lodge in Colorado. I fast-forwarded through the logs from the past week. What appeared on the screen was far beyond anything I had imagined. "You've got to be kidding me," I murmured. The footage was from a week ago, just before I had returned from Dubai. My father used a spare key to open the front door and ushered several men inside, most likely local renovation contractors. On the screen, the workers mercilessly tore up the warm, natural hardwood flooring in the living room, something I had once taken great pride in. In its place, cheap, mass-produced cushioned flooring, clearly chosen to suit Ashley's tastes, was laid down one sheet after another. When I switched cameras, the devastation of my sanctuary, my study, came into view. The books I had collected from all over the world were roughly stuffed into cardboard boxes and stacked in the corner of the room. The craftsman dismantled the custom-made mahogany bookshelves I had ordered, and, unbelievably, began slathering the walls with a garish pastel pink paint, like something out of a child's bedroom. Covering tens of thousands of dollars worth of care and intention with a few $100s of cheap paint. I trembled with rage. The footage continued. In the previous day's timestamp, a large truck had already arrived, unloading unfamiliar furniture one piece after another. Brightly coloured plastic children's furniture, a cheap sofa, and right in the centre of my study, parts of a large jungle gym were piled up. My father stood there, watching the work with visible satisfaction. While I was away without my permission, they were steadily and illegally moving forward with renovations to turn my house into Ashley's house. This was no longer a simple family dispute. It was a clear crime. I immediately pulled up a name from my phone's contacts. David Johnson, my company's legal counsel. "Tracy, what's going on at this hour?" David's voice was calm, despite the late hour. "David, this is an emergency. My father has let contractors into my lodge in Colorado without my consent and is forcing through a major renovation. Trespassing and destruction of property. I'm watching my study being torn apart and unauthorized furniture being moved in, right now on the security cameras." I could hear David sharply inhale on the other end. "That's serious. This isn't just unauthorized entry. They're trying to establish effective control. Tracy, I need to confirm your intentions. They're your parents, but what do you want to do?" "I've already decided. Take the strongest legal measures available. I won't let them set foot in that house again. Everything that's been damaged will be restored to its original state, and I will recover every last dollar of the cost." My voice sounded colder than I expected, even to myself. "Understood. I'll contact the local police chief and arrange for us to meet at the site tomorrow morning. I'll also move forward with preparations for an emergency injunction to halt the construction." "Thank you. I appreciate it." After ending the call, I stared at the camera feed once more. On the screen, the contractors were trying to hang a sign reading Children's Playroom inside my precious study. The next morning, in the frigid air before sunrise, I began to act. Tracy, you're leaving this early? You haven't even had breakfast yet. My father appeared in the kitchen, staring at me in surprise, his hair still mussed from sleep. He looked nothing like the man who had been eagerly plotting to steal my home the night before. Just a harmless, unhurried old man putting on an act. Yes, there's been an urgent revision on the Dubai project. I have to join a meeting immediately through the office's secure line. It's a shame, but I'll have to pass on the pancakes this morning. I answered with a perfectly practiced smile. I see. That sounds serious. And as I mentioned yesterday, even after things settle down at work, you should stay away from that lodge for a while. My father went on, continuing in a tone as if gently lecturing a child. Actually, we heard from a nearby resident yesterday. Apparently, there's been major storm damage in that area. Fallen trees took down the power lines, and there's no timeline for repairs. No electricity, no heating, and the roads are closed, from what I hear. Your vacation would just be ruined. You should focus on your work in your comfortable city office. Leaving that place alone until spring is the best option. Understood? I felt sick listening to the selfish concern embedded in his words. He was fabricating lies about fallen trees and power outages just to keep me away from my own property. While I stayed in the city believing him, he planned to finish the renovations. The desperation in his eyes as he tried to block me from going to the lodge told me everything, ironically proving that the plan was very much in progress. Thank you for the advice. I'll do that, I replied with a flawless, practiced smile as I started the engine. Certain that his lies had worked, my father waved goodbye, visibly satisfied. I drove off and parked in the lot of a diner just around the corner, 1 hour later. Just as I expected, my father's SUV burst out of my parents' garage. My mother was in the passenger seat. Convinced I was heading to the office, they were on their way to the lodge to check on the progress of the construction. Keeping my distance, I followed them. As we climbed the rugged mountain roads of Colorado, my mind grew eerily calm. When we arrived at the lodge, 2 renovation trucks were already parked out front. My parents' SUV pulled in beside them. The 2 of them greeted the contractors warmly, shaking hands, and walked inside as if they owned the place. I stayed in my car. I opened my laptop and brought up a window, the live feed from the lodge's security cameras. Then I sent a short text to David Johnson. The prey is in the trap. Please proceed. His reply came immediately. Ready whenever you are. Fools, I muttered coldly. A few minutes later, police cars appeared silently, their sirens off. 3 of them, then 4. Thanks to the legal groundwork David had already laid, the police response was swift and flawless. The doors were kicked open and officers flooded inside. On the screen, I saw the workers throw their hands up. My mother screamed and collapsed to the floor. My father tried to lunge at one of the officers and was immediately forced down. When I turned on the audio, my father's shouting poured out of the speakers. This is a mistake. I'm Tracy's father. I'm renovating this place for my daughter. Call Tracy. Make her talk to you. My smartphone began lighting up like it had lost its mind. Dad, Mom, Mom, Dad, call after call, repeating dozens of times per minute. It was easy to imagine them desperately begging for help, or hurling abuse. 99 missed calls? It felt like a score measuring the depth of their panic. Instead of turning the phone off, I set the notifications to silent. I didn't answer a single call. I didn't even listen to the voicemails. As a professional project manager, I knew emotional negotiations were a waste of time. I waited a little longer, timing it so they could fully sink into the despair of, Tracy isn't answering, she may not be coming to help us. And only then did I step out of the car. Slowly but with steady steps, I walked onto the lodge grounds. There it was, my sanctuary, brutally destroyed. In the yard, the Italian sofa I had cherished was being hauled out roughly by the contractors and left abandoned in the snow. Near the front door, the beautiful hardwood flooring that had just been torn out was piled up like trash. Tracy! Tracy is here! My mother's voice rang out, almost a scream. Held by the arm near the entrance by a sheriff's deputy, she spotted me and leaned forward desperately. Beside her, my father's face was beet red as he shouted at the officers at the top of his lungs. Hey, my daughter's here. See? She's the owner of this house. Take these ridiculous handcuffs off right now. Tracy, tell them this renovation was done with the family's full agreement. At that moment, I stopped walking and looked at them quietly. Behind them stood the contractors, the ones who had smeared my study with pastel pink paint and tried to assemble a children's jungle gym there, heads lowered, frozen in place. I began to walk toward them. One step, then another. The sound of my boots crunching into the snow echoed, strangely loud in the cold air. Tracy, do you have any idea how many times I called you? Hurry, hurry up and tell these people. The police suddenly showed up and are treating us like thieves. My mother tried to grab my arm, crying, but I stopped her. Do you really think I came here to save you? My voice was exceptionally calm, so calm that it cut through the surrounding chaos and forced the entire scene into silence. Tracy, what are you saying? End this nonsense right now. All you have to do is tell the police it was a misunderstanding. My father was barking orders arrogantly. I let out a short, quiet laugh. Then I pointed to the copy of my police report that one of the officers was holding. A misunderstanding? No, there isn't a single misunderstanding here. I'm the one who called the police. Everyone froze. My father's mouth hung half open. My mother's tears stopped midstream. You called them? Yes. I was supposed to be in Dubai, and yet my home security cameras showed unknown men breaking into my house and destroying it. So I reported it. I told them, there are burglars in my house. Burglars? You'd call your own parents burglars? I call people who duplicate my keys without permission, destroy my property, and attempt to occupy it illegally burglars. Dad, is there a law that says family members are allowed to commit crimes? Tracy, you heartless child. You're the one who left that key at the family home in the first place. My father shouted, his voice strained. That key was stored in the safe at our house. Wasn't that your silent proof of trust? That in an emergency you were entrusting this place to your family? I merely used what I was given. If the key was there, then the right to use it came with it. He desperately tried to coat his crime in the language of trust from my daughter. I watched his pitiful struggle with a cold smile. Do you really think I'm that careless? My quiet voice stopped him cold. I placed that spare key in the safe when I first took on a long-term project in Dubai, but it wasn't a sign of trust, it was bait. What did you say? I've always thought about risk management. I wondered if the day might come when you'd mistake my success for something that belonged to you, and reach for my sanctuary. So I deliberately left that key somewhere you could happen to find. If you were the kind of man who respected my boundaries, that key would have stayed untouched in the safe forever. I stepped closer to him. That key was litmus paper meant to test your integrity. And Dad, you lived up to expectations. No, far beyond them. The moment you picked up that key and entered my house, you signed a contract terminating our trust permanently. You walked straight into the worst trap I prepared. The anger drained from my father's face. Only then did he realize that at the very moment he thought he was controlling his daughter, he had actually been dancing in the palm of my hand. Checkmate, Dad. What you stole wasn't a key, it was your last place to belong. He collapsed, utterly speechless. Sheriff, please take them away. I have nothing more to say to these unknown trespassers. The police's relentless pursuit didn't stop with my parents. Every single worker who had been tearing up the floors was arrested without exception. The contractor in charge shouted in panic, "We were just doing the job we were hired to do." The sheriff's reply was ice cold. It's clear you damaged someone else's property without the owner's consent. Unless you can present a legitimate contract signed by the owner, you will be treated as accomplices. All of you will come with us. As the workers yelled, "This isn't what we agreed to." At my dad, they were cuffed one by one and loaded into patrol cars. I watched it all from a distance, expressionless. My father, my mother, everyone involved in the renovation, lined up and pushed into police cars. There was no sweet escape called family, no excuses like, "we didn't know." The law methodically and mercilessly removed everyone who had violated my sanctuary, exactly as I'd planned. I turned my back on them and walked into my home without looking back even once. This was the real gift of the Christmas party I had spent 2 days preparing for them. Several hours later, a flashy SUV screeched into the now silent lodge at full speed. The door flew open and my sister Ashley, wrapped in a fur coat, ran toward me, screaming hysterically. "Tracy, what the hell is going on? I got a call saying Mom and Dad were arrested." She stopped dead at the entrance, staring at the ravaged interior. "What is this? Where's my playroom? The new kitchen? Didn't they finish the renovations?" "They're finished, Ashley. Every last bit of it. I slowly descended the porch steps and stopped in front of her. The free house you were dreaming of, the bright future Dad promised you. All of it was shattered right here today, against a wall called the law. How can you say something like that? Mom and Dad were thinking about you. No, they were trying to feed their own vanity by consuming my life, and you were just standing there with your mouth open waiting to catch the scraps. Ashley, do you know what they're saying at the police station right now? We did everything for our younger daughter, Ashley, which means the responsibility for the crimes they committed will ultimately fall on you. Ashley's face tightened in fear. Me? I didn't do anything. Dad acted on his own. That's true. Dad acted on his own. But the source of the money used for those independent actions and the screenshots of you bragging on social media to your friends about illegally taking over my house, my lawyer has secured all of that. Ashley, the next place you'll be living won't be my lodge. It'll be a trash-filled apartment you get evicted from for unpaid rent, or... I stopped mid-sentence and leaned in to whisper in her ear. The same cold cell as Mum and Dad. Ashley collapsed onto the ground and began sobbing in the snow. I didn't spare her a single glance. I got into my car, the engine roaring to life. As I watched my sister's snow-covered, screaming figure shrink in the rearview mirror, I felt for the first time a deeply satisfying certainty that I had fully reclaimed control over my own life. 3 months later. The court's ruling was a complete victory for me. My father and mother were found guilty of trespassing, destruction of property, and theft through the illegal duplication of a spare key. They received suspended sentences. The massive renovation costs they had paid to contractors on their own authority were legally classified as expenses incurred in the commission of illegal acts. Not a single cent was returned. Every dollar they had poured in for the happiness of the family was wasted. All that remained was the indelible stain of a criminal conviction. On top of that, I was awarded a total of $100,000 in damages, covering restoration of the lodge and compensation for emotional distress. I knew from the start they had no ability to pay such a sum. As a result, their family home, the very place they had tried so desperately to protect, was put up for auction to cover the damages. The dignified house that had once controlled and exploited me vanished, and they were forced to move into a small, thin-walled rental apartment on the outskirts of town. Meanwhile, my sister Ashley's life with Steve collapsed completely. Assuming they would be able to live in my lodge for free, they had already terminated the lease on their apartment. But my legal action shattered that fantasy, and with my parents' assets frozen, they were left with nowhere to go. According to reports, Ashley and Steve are now living in the damp basement of Steve's parents' house. The luxurious lifestyle she once flaunted on social media has been replaced by a miserable existence on a cold concrete floor. I cut off all contact with them. No matter how high the number of missed calls climbs, I will never open those notifications again. They have lost their right to exist in my world. Now, sitting in the fully restored study of my lodge, I gaze out at the Colorado mountains stretching beyond the window in true peace, protected solely by my own strength, untouched by anyone else's selfish desires. I have completely reclaimed ownership of the project that is my life, and with real freedom finally in my hands, I am stepping forward into something new.